The first question I have is really just to get to know a bit more about Pilcher Group and PBL and what you offer in the development finance space and where your expertise lies.
So the group, the family business has been going for a long while. We're about fourth generation. But the sort of services arm, which PBL forms part of, has been going for around 3 years now, I think it is, Martin, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what we realized is that we thought it would be very helpful for SMEs more widely to tap into a wider infrastructure, understanding and professional team who kind of understand where their pressures are. So, you know, we have this within our client base all the time, where we have an empathy or a sympathy for what they're absolutely doing. So this morning, for example, we had a developer saying, I'm not sure about collateral warranties. You know, we had a bank asking a very general question, which wasn't specific to the actual project that we are funding. So because the team's been there and done that, we were very quickly to the nub of, okay, the bank really needs this and the developer really needs to provide that, and everything else is, don't worry about it. You know, and that's sort of where we wanted to go in terms of the services business. So make sure that, you know, the clients have access to information or are able to dispel problems quickly and efficiently, and also sum them up quickly. So not you know, for things to run on, you know, was this sort of general sentiment.
I was going to ask if there are kind of certain subsectors of the property market which you have the most kind of experience in, or they're kind of, do you have a sweet spot in terms of where you like to help developers?
Yes, so it's typically residential. So we focus around residential development across the UK, and within our team we've got some very good and deep understanding of the UK resi market, having operated, built in, or worked, you know, on projects all over the British Isles and continuing to do so. So yeah, that's kind of where we focus. Albeit we do have a wider understanding within the group as well. You know, my background was I was trained in commercial, and I sort of cut my teeth in central London doing leasing and investment work. So I still maintain links into that world today. So, you know, I've just done a surrender and a regrant on a lease in a Mayfair office of around 2,000 square feet. You know, so, you know, we have a wide and varied remit, as it were, or understanding, but our focus predominantly lays around the resi sector.
I suppose it depends how you want to put it, Beth, but, you know, exactly echo everything Simon said. But you know, there are sometimes transactions and schemes of a semi-commercial basis, which will certainly be within our remit. If it's fully commercial, yes, we can look at it, but it's not where we really want to focus our efforts.
Yeah. And I think being specific as well, there are certain sectors of the market, for example, the build to rent market at the moment in resi, which is gathering a lot of pace. You know, there is a need and there's a need for understanding around schemes that are sort of multifaceted. So, you know, for example, if you were doing a tower in a central city location, you know, it's not going to be all residential. There's going to be different facets within that development, and one has to understand what the drivers are for those are going to be, and to help the developer, you know, because we do get sort of you know, we can cross-reference between successful schemes that we've been working on, whereupon you might go, oh, do you know what, actually that was done there and you should consider this, or there will be a need for that, and you know, that element as well is quite important.
Do you deal with projects which utilize modern methods of construction?
Yes, so we do. So ESG is something that we've sort of got our head around as quickly as we can, and it's something that our clients are well, it's interesting that, as a cross-reference, is that it's an area where people want to go, but the building industry generally is fast moving in some areas, supply side, but pretty slow in others. And for good reason as well. We understand the stresses and strains as to how to move or why to move to modern methods of construction. From a construction point of view, it's not straightforward, certainly in the resi sector, for a whole myriad of reasons for which we help people. But yes, it is an area that we kind of understand quite readily. In fact, I was actually on a site visit last week in the rain, looking at a new building methodology. So that is our commitment to it. It was tipping down.
Brilliant. It's always good to see kind of what companies in our space are doing to bring out propositions that will help support sustainable building and also encourage lenders to do the same. So that's great that you're working on MMC projects as well.
I think it's a very good point that you make about lenders, because the lenders, as much as the construction side of things is very important, and the developers are very important in terms of driving change, but actually the lenders need to work at the same sort of pace, and regulators for that matter as well. So there is a big, there are big gulfs in who's doing what, where, and why, and when at the moment. Really, it's not uniform in any way, shape, or form.
The lending market's being, with all due respect, dragged kicking and screaming into this area. They are kicking and screaming a little less, but it's nowhere near there yet, and it's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah,
I've heard this a lot, and it's I know that MMC is something which lenders struggle to fund because of the security situation.
Yeah. Offsite build, offsite construction. How much is needed for deposit? How much is needed when it lands? How much is needed when it comes on site? And lenders have a problem with it because it doesn't fall within their demise and security till it arrives. So that's the main problem for development funders, is funding something that they have no hold upon. And that's
exactly. But the more that that lenders do step into this space, and that there's more kind of faith in it and more trust in that respect. With both of your opinions, how have you seen the development finance landscape change over the last 12 months or so?
The way the lenders have gone in the last few years, you could say 3 months, 6 months, 12, 18, 24, it doesn't really matter, is that the due diligence requirements for clients themselves personally and the schemes specifically are becoming more and more, should we say, involved, I think is probably the right way to put it. So that clients, for example, who come to us who've not built anything for 10 years are going to find it a very, very rude awakening. But we are on top of it, and you have to be, we are the piggy in the middle. So you have to be informative on both sides, and there's no doubt about it. Lenders who are worth their salt and who are the type of lenders we're going to advise our clients to utilize and partner with on schemes are going to ask a lot of questions. So one of our roles is to be sure we precursor that to the client, saying this is what you're going to get asked. And we do that very early doors, because no longer can people just turn up at the bank, sign a piece of paper and get the funding for the scheme. They want to know who you are, what you've done, what your assets and liabilities are, when you did what you did, how successful it was, chapter and verse.
Out of interest, because considering there is a lot more liquidity in the development market, we're seeing a lot of lenders and a lot of institutional funding come in. Why do you think there are more questions now? Why do you think that that's become more on the heavy side?
It's an interesting point about number of entrants. So just going to that for a second, we have a very, very long list of entrants into the market, of people doing things, and they all do things in slightly different ways. But talking about the sort of, because we read a lot about this in the press, about the sort of weight of capital chasing development. But the reality is that albeit there's a lot of appetite, theoretically, there are not lots of lenders who really want to do things or have necessarily liquidity to do something, or you have to be very succinct on who you go to and why, because everybody has such differing criterias in that regard. So there is a weight of capital in the market for sure, but the deployment is not as smooth or as easy as one would like. And I think the sort of coming back to the question of, you know, the detail of why is it that people want to know more about it? I think the reason why they want to know more about it is because it comes back to their own internal reporting structures on the capital that they're actually lending. So the demarcation of capital that's being lent into development finance is a higher risk zone. And so they have to account for that in their weightings when it comes to deploying capital, which is another reason as to why, albeit people put up these fantastical figures, you know, so-and-so is going to lend another $1 billion, when actually it comes to it, they're not lending anywhere like that because they probably can't due to a number of reasons behind the scenes. And that is another reason, and that's another sort of USP as well. So one of our colleagues who's finance through and through, you know, he spent 20 odd years in the city, and we track as to who the entrants are and who's backing those entrants and why they're backing those entrants. So we're sort of checking the mandates behind the finance. And then when we see that who's capitalized who and why, we then know as to what the likely quantums are, who the type of client is going to suit them, and what sort of schemes and what the geography of those schemes are as well. And then it just comes down to underwriting. And I think the questions that are asked around underwriting are, people just have more access to better underwriting now than they did do 10 years ago, or because of the crash, there is a want and a need to underwrite more readily and you know, theoretically better, you know. So I think that's probably those are the sort of reasons that sit around.
Absolutely. And from my side, certainly what I've seen is that the crash 10 years ago threw a lot of people who'd worked in banking, in development, out of the system and into the challenger bank market. And what's happened is all the lessons from the noughties and the crash have now come home to roost. So you've got a double-edged sword. On one side, you've got people who they say want to throw money at the development lending market because of the returns. But on the other side, you've got a lot of bankers who were working for a lot of all sorts of different, AIB, Bank of Ireland, RBS, you name all of them, who learned the lessons from wanton lending and now want to make sure that they forge their career with the challenger banks, ensuring that they don't make the same mistakes. So that's really brought in an extra level of due diligence. That really means we don't want to be stepping in to build this asset once we've funded it. So the clients, and when we have, listen, we've got this, Simon, Ross and I, with all clients we talk to, it's just explaining why all this information is required. Once they're on side with why, they're happy to provide it. But they've never done, some of them have not done this before since they applied for their own residential mortgage. So it's a changing marketplace, but it's always, at the moment, the trajectory is that's not going to change.
No.
And in addition to the rising amount of questions and due diligence, what key challenges are you seeing at the moment in development finance, and what hurdles do you expect still to come?
From whose perspective?
I'd say from the SME developer.
From the developer's perspective, what challenges have they got to entering or being qualifying for finance?
Yeah.
Martin?
Well, the biggest challenge for the SM end of the SM, the real SM, is normally cash. So, and leveraging cash and utilizing cash in the most sensible way, because small developers quite often will have a number of schemes they want to build, but they haven't got the money to do it. they've got a certain amount of cash. So in very simple terms, it's helping them manage their cash in a way that means that they can leverage their business without taking too many risks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
it's helping them grow their business carefully rather than at a inadvisable rate.
Yeah.
Is a thing. Because what we find with the sort of S side of the business and M to a certain extent is that the businesses typically have, you know, a number of partners in there who are very good in their fields, be it planning permission, construction, marketing, whatever it may be. But we don't come across too many businesses, and I never have in 20 odd years of doing this as a professional, the sort of in the SME sphere with businesses that have experts in finance. And the reason for that is quite obvious, is because people make a choice to go into development because they like to create something of their own, you know, for a customer base. And I think what happens is as those businesses grow, they then go, oh, we need to have, you know, another member of staff who's an expert in finance or whatever it may be. And also, you know, because finance professionals are expensive resources, you know, when businesses start out, certainly the smaller end of business, they just don't have the resource and wherewithal to keep somebody, you know, in the wages that are required in terms of the cost base, and B, actually when the business is small, the work, you know, because you have to be doing quite a lot of projects to have a finance function there all the time. And that sort of led us again to creating what we do is actually, you know, SME businesses, you would advise them not to have a sort of full treasury function in there unless they, you know, unless they get to a really decent size. You don't need to have the cost base, but you do need to have access to the intellectual capital. And I think that's the point. And that's the point of our businesses, where we have that sort of holistic view of saying, look, we've within our group, we've built an awful lot of things. We've seen an awful lot of things, and we know the structures and the leverage positions and the sort of bear traps that surround going too fast, too quickly, or not going fast enough. You know, there's a lot of things where we can add that value.
We see it all the time, Beth, you know, clients who it's just as they don't think this until we talk to them, but it's actually just as important, if not more important, to manage the structure of their finance as it is to manage the structure of their project.
Yeah.
I understand that you are targeting £500,000 in fees in your first year. How have you been getting on with this?
Well, that's so that's okay. We're all right. We're on track with that within the brokerage business.
Yeah.
And certainly within the business more widely, we're okay in terms of our target. But I think it's an interesting question. We're not necessarily fees focused. What we're focused on is we're a small resource. We have an intellectual capability that we like to employ into clients we get on with and schemes that we understand and can add value on quickly. The fees are obviously important as a business. Of course they are, you know, the same as any other business, whether you look at it as profit or fees or whichever description you want. But for us, it's making sure that the clients get what they need, and for us to sort of grow that client base carefully. We don't want to have our intention at the moment is not to have a big business. It's to have a niche business where people want to come back and talk to us regularly. That's our intent. The brokerage business is intended to help small businesses get going, you know, and or seek to bring in more funding alongside existing funders or replace funders who are no longer fit for purpose of that business, for whatever reason that may or may not be. I don't know, you know, we'll see. We've had it every which way. But some businesses, the sort of medium-sized businesses who come and see us, that's when it gets interesting, because then they'll say, we're going to develop, you know, 150, 200 homes this year. We're seeking to build our pipeline to 1,500 units. We've got 16 sites on the go, and they do have, a full proper overhead. They're a proper business. They've been going for a longer period of time. And then they're saying to us, we do want to bring in more debt finance alongside our existing providers as and when the equity capital becomes available to roll into new projects. We want to have and should have a broader base of capital, which is good. And we always champion that. But equally, they'll then say to us, but where do we go from here? They can't grow the business to 2,000 units, 3,000 units, or even from 250 units to 750 units without having, a broader remit or broader capability to raise finance. And that's where it strays into our sort of consultancy business, which we can talk on about another time, where actually there is a capability to continue that journey for a medium-sized business.